Okay, well, thank you for attending our virtual roundtable with Comptroller candidate Brooke Lierman. I am MSATP's Executive Director, Giavante Hawkins, and I want to disclose that I attempted to invite Glassman to this roundtable, but we did not receive a response. Brooke Lierman is a civil rights attorney who has held various seats on committees and founded the Maryland Transit Caucus. She is an advocate on behalf of small businesses and organizations and engages with the community she serves year-round. Brooke, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with us. We are excited to learn more about you, your priorities, and your plans if elected as a comptroller. We have asked our members to send in questions ahead of time and concerns, which I will read out to you. And if time permits, we will take a few questions from the attendees at the end. I understand that you need to hop off at 12:40, so let's dive right in.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And, one of the things that I look forward to is if I am the next comptroller, to having more regular conversations with all of you about what we can be working on and doing better to serve the people of Maryland.
Great, great. I'll start with our first question. What is your background and work experience that qualifies you to be Comptroller of Maryland?
Well, thank you so much for that question. Thank you for having me here today. So, again, yep, I'm Brooke Lierman. I am a civil rights and disability rights attorney. I also do quite a bit of procurement work. I represent small blind-owned businesses all over the nation in federal and state procurements. I'm also a state delegate. I have served for the past 8 years as a member of the House of Delegates representing part of Baltimore City. And in that role, I have served on our Appropriations Committee, helping to oversee and to balance our $50+ billion state budget every year. And I serve as the chair of the Joint Committee on Pensions. So helping to oversee our pension system and our pension plan, making sure that we're fulfilling our obligations to our retirees and passing any legislation that needs to make sure that we're fulfilling that duty and that pledge. So, it's interesting because the role of comptroller is a complex one, right? It's a big agency and a big job. And it covers many facets. Of course, you all know the comptroller is, of course, the tax collector of the state of Maryland and administers all taxes. But it also has a number of other jobs, including being one seat on the Board of Public Works. And the Board of Public Works is the 3-person body in the state of Maryland that approves all funding. So all contracts for transportation contracts, for redoing our water infrastructure, building new schools, wetlands permits, building bridges, buying buses, like you name it, affordable housing and more. All that money, all those contracts go through the Board of Public Works. It's a really unique institution in the country. There's no other state that has a board like it. And so understanding procurement, understanding our state budget is really essential, but also being dedicated to accountability and transparency is essential. And in my role as a state delegate, both in practice and in policy, I've worked for years to make sure that we're building more transparent and accountable structures in government, and to be a transparent and accountable leader myself in terms of dealing with my constituents, working to build coalitions to get big things done. The comptroller also is chair or vice chair of the State Retirement and Pension Board. So making sure that we have a good understanding of how to make sure we're fulfilling our promise to our pensioners is so essential. And because of my work on the Joint Committee on Pensions, I'm ready to go on day one, right? I really understand procurement and the Board of Public Works, the pension system, and even in the tax administration system. I've worked over the past few years with, on tax policy, but also on making sure that we have practices in place in the comptroller's office to help. So last year, I worked with a number of different organizations and a number of different tax preparers and CPAs to pass legislation to create the state's first private letter ruling process, right? So we're one of the very few states in the country that does not do private letter rulings right now. And so I created past legislation to create a process where we're going to have an Office of Legal Division, which will work to produce private letter rulings. And so I'm really excited about the work that we can do. So much of the comptroller's office is about really building partnerships and working with you all, right? Working with you, working with the Maryland Association of CPAs, working with tax attorneys, working with the General Assembly, making sure that we're building partnerships to serve the people of Maryland. And I have a record of really being able to build partnerships, bipartisan partnerships, to get things done in my district, but also across the state, right? Passing legislation to fund public schools, passing the Digital Connectivity Act to create the Office of Statewide Broadband to actually help making sure that every Marylander has access to broadband, and more. Every bill that I've passed over the past 4 years has had a bipartisan vote out of the House of Delegates or the Senate, and I'm really excited to make sure that we continue that leadership. But also, my final note, and then I'll let you get on, I know you have more questions, is that I, at the end of the day, believe that the Comptroller's Office is about being a good partner and working with you. I'm an incredibly accessible leader and state delegate. Sometimes my chief of staff is like, can we just say no to some of these meetings? And I'm like, no, because our job is to talk with you, to work with you. You identified, even in some of the questions that you sent in, a number of challenges and changes that were excellent. And if I'm the next comptroller, these kinds of meetings we will do regularly, right? And some in person too, of course, around the state, so that you can highlight and tell us what needs fixing and what we can be doing better. I'm excited to modernize the office. I know it needs that, better IT systems, and you'll be a part of that conversation. So thank you for having me today, and I'm excited to continue the conversations.
Great, thank you. Number 2, what are your 4 top priorities for your first term in office?
Great question. So I think number one, one of our top priorities of any leader needs to be to build a great team, right? We have to have a great team working in the comptroller's office. Great people who are there, great people who we can bring in, really building a team that is responsive, that's excited to work with you, that excited to be, number one in customer service in the country. Really building a great team has to be a top priority, and it's my top priority. Number 2, I would say, is making sure that we really think through how we can modernize our IT systems. We have the oldest, our state's accounting system is the oldest accounting software system in the nation right now. It's called FEMIS. It's really old. It uses COBOL. It's on a mainframe. We can do better. We still have to roll out the new system for tax paying as well, Compass. And we have to make sure that that system is meeting your needs and meeting the needs of your clients, right? And we have to make sure it's easy and intuitive and simple to use, and that it's the operability is interoperable, right? So want to make sure that we can have great new IT. There's a lot of other IT systems that we can update, right? For instance, you check into a hotel. Every time you check in, if you give them your cell phone, they might text you 10 seconds later and say, how was your check-in experience? Give us your feedback. We need to create ways to have more feedback mechanisms from you and from the general public for dealing with the comptroller's office. I'm excited to do that. And then finally, we need a CRM system, customer relation management system. Right now, if you call the comptroller's office and you talk to one person, you hang up and you call back again and you talk to a different person, those 2 people have no record that they are both talking to you. And so really making sure that we're taking advantage of great new IT systems that are available and possible to create both a better work experience for the people in the comptroller's office so they can do their jobs better, but also a better experience for all of you. So those are some ideas around modernizing. 3, I feel strongly that we should, and that's all modernizing in tax administration. I should say I have other ideas on modernizing for procurement, making sure that we have a dashboard so that we can see where our money's going and we can follow contracts to make sure our contractors are fulfilling their obligations, whether they're minority business enterprise obligations or payment obligations. So there's a lot more across the board we can be doing. I'm just focusing on the tax administration piece. Another thing that I'm excited to do is make sure that we create an office of the taxpayer advocate, right? This is an office that many other states and the IRS all have. We in Maryland have an ombudsman, but not a taxpayer advocate. And the idea, of course, behind a taxpayer advocate is that that person or that office can answer questions, right? Find ways to reduce barriers. Of course, our system is dependent on voluntary tax compliance for the most part. So we have to find ways to reduce barriers for taxpayers and make the system more efficient, fair, and transparent. And having a taxpayer advocate office to help actually resolve issues that can't be resolved through normal agency channels is really essential and important. So those are a few of the things that I'm excited to do. I would say that within all of those, is my desire to make sure that we're building into the process conversations and feedback in a more intentional way. Right. So when we're thinking about what a system should look like, when we're thinking about what the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate should do, making sure that we work with all of you to get your ideas and your feedback so that we can build that in from the ground up.
Great, great. What are your plans for keeping the present department heads in place?
I don't have any plans right now on that. I think that's a sort of after the election type question or conversation, but look forward to meeting with all of them to talk about the work that they're doing and, you know, what they want to be doing, and, you know, excited to see, you know, what works and, you know, build the best team we can.
Great. Number 4, are you aware that there is no equivalent of an accounts receivable system in the state comptroller's office?
Interesting. Nobody's brought that up yet, but I think, oh, maybe Andy Shoffley brought that up. It is a challenge. You know, there are a lot of challenges that I've discovered running over the past couple years. And I've been running a truly 24 county campaign. I've had conversations in every county of the state, most of them multiple times, you know, from Pocomoke City and Ocean City to Rising Sun to St. Mary's and Oakland and Frederick and everywhere in between. And they've been great conversations. I recently met with, you know, a university president to talk about the challenges of university systems and their payment systems. And, you know, I talk with nonprofits about the fact that they're not getting paid from grants quickly enough. You know, I've talked with a number of CPAs and tax preparers about challenges with predatory tax preparers and the need to crack down. So I think, you know, one of the things that continues to be exciting is that there are so many people who want to make the office work better, and you all are a part of that. And I think that's why you're here. So thank you.
Sure. What priorities will you have for further automation of some of the filing and payment processing capabilities with the next phases of Compass? And you spoke to this a little bit, but specifically those relevant to tax professionals seeking to resolve issues.
Sure. So I think, I think there's a lot more that we can be doing with artificial intelligence, AI, in terms of automation. And we can be thinking through how we automate things and make them more intuitive online through Compass. So one of the things that I am looking forward to doing is within the first few months of office, it's bringing, you all, MACPA, tax attorneys, like all in to have a conversation about where Compass implementation is, what the plans are right now, and what's missing. Because I think it's really clear, Compass is it's still a couple years out from what I've understood. And so now is the time to make sure that everything that we're building out is what you all want there to be, right? And even since we first since the Comptroller's Office first contracted to build Compass, there have been a lot of changes in what's possible, right? I mean, new IT is developed all the time. And so seeing what's out there that we should be updating and building in as we build this system is really important. So that's a great example of, that's a good question. And I want to say, like, a lot of these answers are going to come up to, like, what do you all need to see there? What are you seeing in best practices from around the country? We're not building a system that I personally, need to find to be the best system. You all need to think it's the best system, right? And so your feedback is really going to be important on that. And Andy Shoffley and I have talked about that quite a bit.
Okay. Is there a plan to build a taxpayer portal into the system design whereby taxpayers and their representatives can access information, both current and past, file appeals, and other communications?
So I don't know if that's the plan right now, but that's my plan. I can't tell you what the current comptroller and current Compass contract says because I don't have it, because I'm not the current comptroller, but that is what I would like to see happen. So yes, I am strongly in support of that.
Great. Currently, there is a process to submit power of attorney forms via fax. However, even though the practitioner requests copies of notices on the POA form, in the member's experience, this has never happened. What can we expect with this process?
That's a great question. And actually, I have a lot of experience with POAs in a lot of different forums because I am my mother. My mother has Parkinson's, and I am her power of attorney for everything. And it has been a fascinating experience to see how behind the times so many systems across, whether it's banking or Medicare or like all these different systems that I deal with her are in handling POAs. I mean, it's shocking to me, frankly, like this is not rocket science. So yeah, I mean, we should absolutely be making sure and clear that the POA authorization is clear, is easy, it can be uploaded electronically, can be kept there, and can be referred to.
Great. A question from a member. If a taxpayer is 65 or older, why aren't traditional IRA distributions subject to the pension exclusion line 10A if the IRA balances were created by past rollovers from employer 401k plans?
That is a question that I cannot answer off the top of my head. I'm not sure why that was created that way. It sounds like it might be a policy within the comptroller's office that is subject to change, because it should be. I mean, it probably shouldn't be like that. So probably that's when the comptroller issued regulations around the law. Those are the regulations that they went with. And so it's something that we'll need to look at amending.
Great. Let's see. From a member, for many of my clients, the inability to make electronic payments is an issue as they don't have accounts with checks. Will you address this as comptroller?
Sorry, can you say that again? There's a little noise.
For many of my clients, the inability to make electronic payments is an issue as they don't have accounts with checks. Will you address this as comptroller?
Yes, absolutely. That has actually come up several times. And we need to be able to meet people where they are and make sure that they can pay in whatever way suits them and and to create a more accessible process. I saw in the Q&A, there was a question about customer service.
Mhm.
And I hope that I've addressed that a little bit in all of the things that I've spoken about for the past 15 minutes. But if not, I just want to reiterate that this is something that I care deeply about. And so when we're talking about modernizing our IT, when I'm talking about my number one priority is building a great team, this is all about making sure that taxpayers and the people of Maryland get the service that they need. My goal is to really make government work better for people. And so a huge part of that, of course, is making the comptroller's office work more smoothly, make sure the phones gets answered, make sure we have a great team there in place to do this. This is my biggest priority. And it has to be, when you're the comptroller. So if you were my constituent, hopefully you would have, I get reelected by wide margins because my team responds and we show up and we take meetings and we're very present and proactive in the community. And we handle, throughout the pandemic, we've handled thousands of calls with a very tiny team, right? I have one full-time staff person or not even full-time. But it's because we all work really closely together and we develop ways in which we can get things done for people quickly. And I'm a forceful advocate and an effective advocate. And so, I just wanted, this is so important to me that I just wanted to say that, yes, I will be very hands-on in making sure that we have high quality, like the best customer service. This is my goal. And so it's a big part of the reason that I'm excited to be the comptroller is to positively affect people's lives. And, every taxpayer in the state of Maryland, I want them to walk away being like, I had it, maybe I don't love paying my taxes, but gosh, they make it easy in Maryland. It's such a pleasant process. So thank you.
Well, since we're in the chat, we do have a couple other questions there, and I'll just read a couple of them out for you. Do you support the Maryland taxpayers to select the itemized deduction option on their Maryland tax return if they take the standard deduction on their federal return?
So I believe you're talking about decoupling, or this would require decoupling. And I'd be happy to talk more about that. I do think it's something that we should be looking into. My understanding is that part of the reason that the current comptroller's office was perhaps not always in favor of that is because of the challenge with our IT systems. And so again, this goes back to needing to modernize our systems so that we can not be hamstrung by them, and we can actually make policy that works better for people. So I do think it's an important conversation to have within the comptroller's office and within the General Assembly, whether we should be doing this decoupling and allowing that to happen.
Okay, then another one we have from Richard Gottfried. What will be your policy on reducing tax preparers who have not passed or even taken or are not the Maryland Individual Income Tax Preparers exam? Which means that the tax preparers are paid for preparing tax returns in Maryland, but the signature on the return is self-prepared.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a big problem. Clearly a big problem. Look, I'm an attorney who represents a lot of working people. And I often am representing them for unpaid wages in Fair Labor Standards Act cases. And I will tell you, if you're an employer who is not paying your employees, you're also not paying your taxes. And so I have, I think, good experience in terms of understanding the power of enforcing our laws and how to do that effectively to make sure that we're ending sort of bad practices and going after bad actors. To make sure that the comptroller's office is focused on that. Fraudulent and predatory preparers, take advantage of inexperienced or vulnerable filers, and certainly people who are not taking the tax preparer exam. Look, they offer false promises for higher refunds. We have to do a better job at making sure that we are enforcing. And I also want to create a task force to really work with the State Board of Individual Tax Preparers to improve enforcement measures, right? To make sure that there are disclosure requirements for tax preparers that require predatory preparers to clearly disclose their tax preparation fees to customers, to disclose any payments received on refund advance loans, et cetera, things like that, to make sure that we can fight more predatory practices. So thanks for that question. And I look forward to working with all of you to improve some of our enforcement.
That ties in a little bit to my next question, which a member submitted. It says, in its current form, the Tax Preparer Board hasn't been able to effectively monitor unscrupulous and unlicensed tax preparers until a problem is detected when returns are filed. This was a source of frustration with the current comptroller. And the comptroller's office, as this person understood, cannot direct any of the Preparer Board activities. So do you have plans to interact with the Preparers Board to come up with compliance on the front end so that we can, monitor those tax preparers who have not met Maryland's credentialing requirements?
Right. That's a great question. And yes, I think it's what I just mentioned, I'd like to put together a task force to sort of go over all of the current challenges and the problems that you're seeing, that the comptroller's office is seeing, go to the board with that, go to the next governor and the General Assembly with that and say, here's what, this group of people who all are the experts in this field, believe that we need to do to make sure that we're cracking down on this bad behavior and making sure that we're preventing it, right? Because one of the huge challenges is if somebody files or uses this, a fraudulent tax preparer, and then they are on the hook for, money that they paid the tax preparer and then they end up owing more taxes. It's bad for the state and it's bad for that individual, of course. And so we have to be doing a better job at monitoring that. I've actually talked with the Cash Campaign a few times about how we do a better job at working with SSTAT, which of course holds the licenses for the Department of Labor, which holds the licenses for many of these fraudulent firms, to make sure that we're pulling those as well, and that we're going after them and using all of our different tactics. So I look forward to working with you all on that. Absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks, Brooke. At this time, we have some time for a few questions. So if you do have a question for Brooke, please go ahead and put that question in the chat, and then we'll get that answered for you.
Thank you. And I also want to say, please, I hope you'll visit my website, brookelierman.com, BROOKELIERMAN, brookelierman.com. There's a policies page that has some information on ideas on tax administration. Would love to have your feedback and ideas. Certainly, my goal is to be running a transparent and accountable, inclusive office where we're working with all of you on a regular basis to make sure that we're serving the people of Maryland in the best way we can. And I'm excited about it. It's been, wonderful working to get around the state over the past 2 years. Running for office is challenging, but also incredibly rewarding, meeting with people who are serving their neighborhoods, building their small businesses. And have had it's really been an honor for that people have taken the time to come out and talk with me about their ideas to make things better, including all of you today. So Gigi, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. And thank you again for meeting with us. Our practitioners, they're the boots on the ground, right? So every day, they're the ones that are helping the tax-paying citizens of the state. And I hope our questions and concerns will aid you in your priorities if elected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will just close by saying, I think please understand that this is the beginning of the conversation and not the end. I look forward to making sure that you are a part of conversations moving forward about how we build a more customer-centered, constituent-centered office, how we build on the work of the current comptroller to, do better, to do even better, to make sure that we're working all over the state of Maryland, right? And that's why I've been running a 24 county campaign to get everywhere. And I do really appreciate the work that you do. I put my email address and my website in the chat, so please feel free to keep in touch. And I hope you'll, tell your neighbors and friends. I hope I can earn your support in this election, and I hope that we have the opportunity to work together in the future.
Great. Thanks, Brooke. And thank you for being here today. Well, it looks like we haven't had a question come through, so I will let you go. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
You too.